Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, and good evening to you, WeatherBrains fans. Welcome to WeatherBrains. This is episode number 838. It's the pre-show. And we're doing this on what date is this here? The 7th of February, 2022. This is James, and this is the great part of the show here. We do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. So let's get everything set up here. And if you're looking for the show content, move the slider over about 6 minutes and you should be there. But you know the deal. We got to get the embed code over on the live.bigbrains media page so people can watch there. And that's how they take the live feed on the television side. And then we have to get our guests all lined up here, but hope you've had a good week. I'm kind of excited that this week is really quiet weather-wise. Had a pretty rough week here last week. We had a tornado death, and you just hate that. A 71-year-old woman was killed in the community on the western side of my state, Alabama, in Hale County, and they were in a mobile home, and 3 people in the mobile home were seriously injured, critically injured. And you just look back on what could we have done differently. We just did our best to remind people you got to be out of mobile homes. I think we gave people adequate time to do that. And again, I don't know if they heard the warning. I don't know. We'll find out later. But anyway, let's get the guest on here. So for that reason, I'm thankful that we have kind of a quiet week here this week. In fact, it's not going to rain here for the next 7 days, which is a very good thing. I don't see any snow or ice issues where we are here. So let's invite the gang. Get them all on here. All right, they have been invited, so we should be good to go. This was Thursday of last week when we had the tornadoes. It was an EF2, and the warnings were really good. And even before the formal warning was issued, we just did our best on the air to say, if you live in a mobile home, you've got to get out now, because in that part of the state, a lot of people do live in manufactured housing. And it's one of the social science things where Kim and her folks will just need to help us see what we can do, if anything. And I know that we can't prevent, every fatality. You just can't do that. But again, anytime there's one, it's not good. All right. I see Neil and Bill.
Hello, Mr. Host.
What's new?
Just talking about the tornado death here last week. That's so frustrating. The warning was very timely. And I went out of my way on the air to say, if you live in a mobile home, you've got to get out before the warning was issued. I think they had adequate time to get out. I think there's a community shelter in Sawyerville. And again, I just assume they didn't hear it. They just missed it. And again, I know that we cannot prevent every fatality in a tornado. I understand that, but still, it happens on your watch, and you'd like to know the circumstances surrounding it. But we had 3 critical injuries and 1 death in the same mobile home. The mobile home was carried across the street, and there was just nothing left. And I guess we're fortunate there weren't 4 deaths, looking at the damage there. But so that was Thursday of last week. And that'll be more of a Kim question than anybody else, I guess.
How good is the weather radio in that area, James?
It's great. The Demopolis transmitter is it Jefferson, which is on Highway 28 south of Demopolis, but it's on a 450-foot tower, and it covers that part of Hale County just like the dew. It's good. It's reliable. And I would assume that the percentage of folks that have a weather radio in that part of Hale County, probably less than 1%. And it's a case where the only thing I can look back on it and see what maybe I didn't do adequately was the remind people that, hey, if you know somebody that lives in this polygon, help us, call them or text them now. And I did that a lot during the coverage, but I don't think I did it adequately for that instance. And maybe that hurt us because we've learned that that's probably the best resource we have. It's people that know people in these polygons. And, most people don't pay attention to weather, and they don't have a weather radio, and they just don't. And I'm not blaming them. It's just, people are interested in other things, but most people are not weather dweebs like we are here. And that Be a Hero campaign is pretty important. So, but anyway,
hey, James.
Hey,
and on that note, Midland Weather Radio is back with us tonight as a sponsor. So,
okay.
We'll be joined by Bruce after the recorded segments. And if you got any pieces we did before, it should be just like it was when we had AMS and Midland at the same time. So whatever we did then, this is kind of a last minute deal.
He had a graphic, a graphic. Do I need to have that ready?
Yeah, have that ready. I don't know if we had any recorded piece that mentioned Midland at the beginning. Seems like Jen did one that had both.
Jen, didn't you have something?
Yeah, I think it said AMS and Midland in the same deal. So this was kind of last minute, but
yeah,
if you can find it,
y'all get into the interview section, and I will do some research. Well, y'all do the interview section. So don't ask me for a random comment because I'll be digging through the files.
That'll be a great conversation right there about weather radio, because you can talk about that might be a good chance to talk about that fatality and the coverage from Demopolis, et cetera.
Save somebody's life.
Right.
Candace, can you hear us okay?
Oh, good.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Good evening, everybody.
Okay.
Happy Monday.
Dr. Boyd.
It's just like she's in a professional looking studio.
I
here,
know.
Good lighting and
Like
good sound. I mean, it's like a bunch of total dweebs.
If we're not recording, I'll tell you my secret. I'm actually in my bedroom, and this is a screen that like moves. See?
I need one of those. I need an official WeatherBrains screen. So
I know.
Learn about my Peloton back here.
Because like all those backgrounds, sometimes it looks like you're fading in and out of, you're going into different dimensions.
Right.
So this way, it just looks like you're, like you said, you're in a studio.
That's the way to do it, because thank you, Jen. I saw your note here, because the chroma key that you have in Zoom is just not good. It's
right.
It's bad. All right, let's
almost
get this
as
thing
good
going.
as Troy's fake background. It looked like a Betsy office or something.
I want a jigsaw puzzle of Troy's background. I think that would be fun. That'd be fun to do.
All right, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Join the American Meteorological Society by becoming a member of the band. The AMS Weather Band is a global community of weather enthusiasts dedicated to learning and sharing their love of science. Visit amsweatherband.org to learn more and join the band today.
WeatherBrains, episode number 838, weekly show all about weather. This is for the 7th of February, 2022. And we're glad you're with us. And we've got, looks like most of the gang is here this week. So I see Troy Kimmel in Austin, Texas. Yep. Troy, you're almost on your 1-year anniversary of your debacle. You having PTSD?
And you got a boil water advisory, don't you, Troy?
Yeah, we got boil water advisory, but that's the banana republic that Austin is. And this is like their third or fourth boil water ban in Austin in 5 years, and it's just amazing that our city can't manage to do this. They admitted it's a mistake. It was a mistake. Not a good idea to do that on the tail end of a winter storm. And so, but it really is interesting to kind of look at it. They could do things better. I've never been a big fan about the way the city of Austin was run, and been kind of critical of that many times. But you know what? The weather's been great. I mean, we had a little ice, 1/10 of an inch of sleet accumulation, and about, I guess it was 1,500 ice accretion. So with that storm Wednesday night into Thursday. And it was actually pretty interesting because out back, sleet was on the ground for about 3 days in patches. You still, even yesterday morning, I still saw a little bit of sleet, even though we were back in the 50s. But it was interesting for Austin, and it really caused a mess. Schools are all out Thursday and Friday. For the rest of y'all folks, Jen, everybody else, all the folks further north, even Rick, may not be very much, but around Austin, we like to freak out about things like that.
So Troy, what is your boiling water technique?
I hadn't boiled any water yet.
What?
I'm just taking the water. I figured if it didn't go get me, then something else will. So I don't worry about it that much.
Superior immunities, right, Troy?
Yep. Yeah, I figure I built up an immunity. A lot of people say City of Austin water is bad in the first place. So I don't worry that much about it. Actually, I actually have always I've got a big supply of bottled water here, and always have kept at least 8 to 10 cases of bottled water. And I always do that just as emergency preparedness sort of thing.
Are you a prepper?
Not really. I mean, it is if you count a bunch of damn cans of SpaghettiOs. But that's pretty much it. I mean, but no, I'm not really. I hoard everything else except for food. And here's where I hoard food. So, anyway.
Troy's monologue was full of show titles. That was awesome.
Yes, it was.
So
no problem. But it's been a beautiful day in Austin. We got the 62 today in Austin, 62, 61, sunshine all day. And I'll take that any day of the week. A little bit of that James last week. The neighbors came and checked on me Thursday. They were just wanting to make sure I was okay in here. If I was just like staring at the ceiling, waiting for it to fall down or something. And, but no, I did good. I did pretty well with that. It only got down to like 18 or 19, so it wasn't that cold.
Okay. Yeah, you can handle that. Well, let's go up the road, up Interstate 35 to Rick. How cold was it in Norman, Oklahoma?
Oh, gosh, I can't remember. My brain froze, and I can't remember. We were single digits and wind chills in the 0 to -10. We got, I don't know, 4 to 6 inches, some isolated 8-inch snow amounts around here. It's 57 here today. We still got piles of snow around, but it's slowly going away. This is the absolute worst part of snow. I love snow. I don't love the forecasting part of it. Love watching it. Love when it's falling. But the instant it stops, can we just wave a magic wand, and make it go away? Because that's just it's no fun after that. But we're working on it. 57 and in the 60s tomorrow. So
okay. Moving in the right direction. Jen, how much snow do you have on the ground?
Nightmare here. We had sleet. It was the longest period I've ever seen sleet here. It was probably 12 hours of sleet, and that just coated everything. And then we had probably a good 4 inches of snow on top of it. Ooh. The roads were awful. And then it got bitterly cold here. So overall, most of central Ohio had a good 6 to 9 inches of the snow sleet combo. And it was the longest week I've ever had. I counted, I have 65 cities through the week, and probably 3/4 of them had some kind of message, either a winter weather message, or then we had all the flooding that started popping up down across the South. And so I think I used all my words on Tuesday for the entire week. I had nothing, I didn't know what else to do. It was the hardest. One of my forecasts for Columbus, I actually said something to the effect of, I can guarantee there's going to be wintry weather, but I can't tell you what, when, or how much. I'm Jennifer Naramore, and I just left
I love you, Jen.
That's all I can say. And it verified.
Honesty is always the best policy. That's all I can say.
You got it.
Wow. All right. Well, let's see. Neil, you've missed out on the snow and ice, haven't you? You've missed all of this stuff.
Yeah, we just had a little bit of rain here. There's a little coastal low offshore, but that's about it. It's been pretty uninteresting. Kind of a little nor'easter with some cold air damming, but right around 39, 40 degrees.
Yeah. I was in Charleston this weekend, and it was everybody's saying, yeah, we've had a little ice spell or two, but it's been pretty quiet. So that's a good thing. Well, let's get right into it. Bill Murray, let me kick it over to you. And by the way, I want to thank our friends at Midland for sponsoring our show tonight as well.
Yeah, they're back with us tonight. Bruce Jones will join us after the recorded segments as he did all during tornado season last year. James, and we're real thankful to them and the AMS Weather Band. I've got my AMS Weather Band certificate right off the screen here, one of my favorite things. So we thank both of those organizations for being a part of the show. And we've been trying to put this show together for months, and it's finally come together. Tonight we have the Deputy Division Director, one of the Deputy Division Directors of the National Science Foundation, Dr. Candace Boyd, with us. And Candace, I'm not going to go into all your pedigrees because we want to walk through all those. But you've done some amazing things in your career, and we want to cover all that tonight. And we're glad to get you on here so we can just have you for an entire night.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad to have the opportunity to chat with everyone.
And we won't tell you the secret of your great background or anything there. So you have the most professional studio out of all of us here. But it seems like you're a lifelong learner to me, Candace, in sort of studying your educational career. It seems like you never stop officially learning. I mean, we all keep learning, unofficially, but you've kept adding those certifications and degrees and things all along the way. Take us back to how you got interested in weather. And start there.
Okay, well, do many of you or any of you know the name Tom Schilling?
Oh yeah.
All right. Yeah. So Tom Schilling
he's been on here. He's been on here twice, Candace.
Yeah. So
Skilling is an old WeatherBrains alum. Yeah.
That's
okay.
Right.
All right. Well, then I'll tell you the story. I was born and raised in Chicago, or the south suburbs of Chicago. And I was in a program called Inroads. Now, I don't remember what the acronym is, but basically it's a summer program to encourage students to go to college. And so they would take us on a lot of different field trips during the summer. And one of those field trips was to a television station. So we go to the television station, and of course, everybody is enamored with the journalist who sits behind the table, and they get to read off of the teleprompter. And so they were letting us take turns sitting in that anchor chair and reading the teleprompter. And the line was so long, so I looked to my left, and there were a bunch of maps on the wall. So I walked over and I started looking at the maps, and there was a guy who I didn't know at the time was Tom Schilling. He had like a 5-minute conversation with me, telling me about some of the things he was doing to create the forecast for that night. And I said, yeah, that's pretty cool. I think I want to be like him. And the rest is history. So it just shows you how impactful one conversation can be, because that one conversation led into now a 28-year career in the federal government. So I always want to thank Tom Schilling for just taking a couple of moments to just talk to a little kid.
Well, you never know what impact you're going to have. And James, I know you probably got a million of those. I know you took a young man that our librarian in our local school told us about, her grandson, who was petrified of the weather. And I asked James if his family could come up and spend a Friday evening, there at the studio. And James, they say that child is the biggest ambassador now of severe weather in central Alabama, all because of you. You took him from being fearful of the weather to being, charged by it, so he could, influence his, friends and family around him.
Information is powerful. That's the one thing I've learned about, kids that have a phobia. If you just talk to them and show them things and do it in a non-forceful way, and they understand that storms are actually a critical part of the water cycle, and we need them, and it's a process. But yeah, we started a process that night. But that's a cool story. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool. We're going to get into water resources in a minute, so that's an important part of our conversation with Dr. Boyd tonight. But talk to us about your educational path, because it was pioneering in one way, and this being Black History Month, this is a good time to recognize that, Cam.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I attended Iowa State University, and I was the George Washington Carver Scholarship recipient. And many people know Dr. George Washington Carver because of all of his advancements with agriculture and with the peanut. And many people associate him with Tuskegee University, which is true. He did do a lot of work at Tuskegee, but what people don't realize is that he was the first African-American to attend Iowa State University. So in his honor, they created a scholarship, and I was a scholarship recipient. And so about 100 years later, I was at Iowa State University, and I became the first African-American female to receive an undergraduate degree in meteorology from that university. And then I stayed another 2 years and I received a double master's in both meteorology and water resources. So if it wasn't for those programs to enable people like me to further your education, I wouldn't be talking to you tonight.
So Candace, I was interested to learn though that you wanted to be a television broadcaster first, and that didn't quite go the way you wanted it to go. So tell us about that.
Yeah, that's true. So I interned at a local affiliate television station, and I thought it was going well until the tertiary meteorologist suddenly left the station and they needed somebody to fill in. So I was the student intern, so they felt I was a perfect match. So I became the weekend meteorologist until a new program director came and basically told me that I did not fit the demographic. So they thought that it was better to find someone who did fit the demographic to be a part of that meteorology team. So I was really devastated because, again, up until that point, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a broadcast meteorologist. But, sometimes things work out. And sometimes, when things don't work out, it opens another door. And so even though I wasn't able to go into broadcast meteorology, I was still able to use my meteorology skills. And I became a student intern at the National Weather Service in Des Moines, Iowa, as a student intern. And I ended up working for the National Weather Service for the next 13 years. So one door closed, but another door opened, and it was an awesome opportunity for me.
So talk about the importance of that SCEP program with the National Weather Service and why it's still so relevant today.
Yeah, I do think it's relevant because there are not a lot of opportunities for individuals to move into full-time positions. And so this Student Career Experiences Program, what I really didn't know at the time is that it non-competitively transferred me into a full-time job. So I didn't know it reading all the paperwork and stuff back then. I just thought I had a really cool job, but it was a job that transferred me into a full-time equivalent, or what's called an FTE in the government. And so that now, looking back on it, was invaluable. And we really need those opportunities to create the next pipeline of future enthusiasts, as we said earlier today, or future meteorologists. We need opportunities that will open the door for them and help them learn about the actual aspects of a particular job. Getting a degree in something is one thing, but actually applying that practical knowledge day to day is something totally different. So we really need opportunities for individuals to create that pipeline. And if I dare say so, not only at college, but there's some who aren't even privileged to go to college. So I think we now need to start thinking outside the box about maybe even having opportunities to create a pipeline through community colleges, or in some cases, even high school, starting the programs at that level, so we can make sure that those people who have an interest in atmospheric science can continue and can build and obtain those degrees.
Candace, thanks for being on, and I couldn't agree more. That's how I got into the Weather Service too. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, I'm not that old, but back in the day, it was called, I was a student trainee, a GS3 student trainee, and working while I was going to school, and then I got a non-competitive assignment after I graduated. I think that's gone through several different iterations now. It's called Pathways. And so if there's any students listening, if you can get involved in the Pathways program, that is a great opportunity to get your foot in the door and more. I mean, it's a great program to learn. So yeah, I just, that struck a nerve with me in a good way that's a great way to get into the Weather Service. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that. So thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to pile on. I did an internship over at Raleigh. I think it ended up being a program that turned into C-Star. But yeah, I worked there with Kermit Keeter, who was the SU at the time.
Candace, one thing that I think is so important, what you talk about is, I tell people at the University of Texas, I say, the classroom is great, but when you get a chance, get out there into the real world. Get away from these campuses, because they're really not the real world. You want to get out there and see what you like. And I'm so impressed with your story. You and I go back because you have some history in Texas. Yeah. But at the same time, I love the story with Tom Skilling. And I love what you did in the process of getting your foot in the door in the National Weather Service. And I think it really goes to show that get out there, don't be afraid. If you're even a high school student, or particularly if you're a sophomore, junior in college, no matter what field you're going into, get away from campus, get out there in the real world, see what it's like, and then see what doors open for you. But I'm so impressed, and always have been, with Candace anyway. One of her big fans, and I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, I really do agree that internships are important, also because it will help you find out what you don't want to do. if I can say it that way. And that's okay. That's okay. Because again, you want to find a job that's a good fit. You want to be in a place where you have an inclusive culture. And it's okay to say, this isn't the right job for me. So that's another aspect of interning as well, is not only to get real world experience, but to figure out what you actually want to do. Because so many of us, like you said, have one focus on what we think our future will look like. And I'm a perfect example of where, if it wasn't for an internship, I wouldn't have the career path that I had today.
Yeah.
Candace, it's so good to have you on here. And I just wanted to make a comment. Now, Tornado Talk doesn't officially have an internship, but the kids that work with me, it's essentially an internship for them. What we have are, well, now it's up to 4 college students that are helping me write these summaries. We have meetings every week, and I throw them right into the fray of communicating and talking and interacting with the National Weather Service. Nelson's talked to Rick and interacted on email, and just being able to grow that way. So I totally agree that it's an awesome opportunity to have things for the high schoolers and for the college students to be able to dip their toe in and figure out, what do I really want to do? I'll tell you, as someone who's been a meteorologist for blah, blah years, I learn a lot from them, more than they probably learned from me. And it's really been an amazing journey. So I love hearing your story, and just can't wait to hear what else you're about to say here.
And, Candace, too, the one thing that I find interesting, and I tell students this, is when you go out and do this sort of thing, and you get out in the real world, and you get out there and you find out whether you like, or like Candace says, what you may not like about those areas you want to go into, you never know what door you may open, that in about a year or so, all of a sudden you hear from somebody and you've actually got your foot in the door somewhere. So, and it sounds so much like what you've done, Candace, I think. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's, especially when it comes to atmospheric science, there's so many opportunities to use atmospheric science in your day-to-day work activities. So again, I think sometimes people only focus on the things that they can see, or the tangible aspects of meteorology. And I think that's the onus is on us to start telling our stories and to start mentoring others, and trying to pull that next generation along with us.
Candace, talk about I think I'm going to probably butcher this. It's a program or a project that I wasn't real familiar with, but Toga Coar, probably everybody else on the panel knows exactly what I'm talking about, but you were presenting about that, right? And that got you recognized. And so that's an important way to be recognized as a college student too, but talk about that experience for a moment.
Yeah, so Toga Coar is a long acronym. It's the Tropical Ocean Global Atmosphere Coupled Ocean Atmosphere Response Experiment. And so I was a summer intern at NCAR, the National Center for Atmospheric Research, and I worked with Peggy Lamone, which is only one of 5 American Meteorological Society female presidents, and I was her summer intern. And so I was able to work on this collaboration. It was an international collaboration of over 20 countries, and we all used remote sensing data to try and learn more about the propagation of thunderstorms near the equator. Now, what I really want to point out, Bill, is that not only was it a great experience for me to research and learn hands-on what researching and collaboration is, but I was able to take my research project and not only get school credit for it, but then I went to the American Meteorological Society the next year and I presented at the student conference. And so that was not only a great opportunity to just speak and present and to share knowledge, but it was an awesome networking opportunity. And from there, I actually met someone, and I had an internship the following year at the National Meteorological Center. It's now called NCEP, but at the time it was NMC in Camp Springs, Maryland. And again, the reason why I got that internship was because I went to the AMS conference, I was able to present, I was able to network. So again, it just shows the importance of, like you said, keeping doors open, being open to the possibility. And then one crucial aspect that, a lot of future scientists and future meteorologists need to know is the importance of networking and, just learning all about the people that are around you and all the skills that they can bring to you as well.
And you ran into a little fellow there at NMC that you spent some time with, Dr. Louis Uccellini, who I have to admit, he got you bumped from the program for his retirement program. So if you have a bone to pick with him, Candace, this is the time, because he needed the week that you were scheduled originally, but we're glad we got you on tonight. So talk about your experience with Louis and your time at NMC.
Well, I'll definitely raise that the next time I see him. Yeah. but I think he gets a pass because I think that was his retirement, right? And
it was our little WeatherBrains retirement.
40 plus years of service, and I think I just have 28. So yeah, I think I'm going to give him a pass on that one.
Well, we'll still be doing this in 12 years, Candace, so you can come back and bump whoever's going to be on that night.
Okay, all right. Well, that sounds good. Well, at the time that I went to NMC, it was the following summer. And again, I was a summer intern, and I worked at the technical support group, and that was in MOD, which was the Meteorological Operations Division. And at the time, Louis Uccellini was the director of NCEP. So I think this was 1995. Somebody's gonna have to fact check me. But at the time, that was like one of the most active hurricane seasons on record. So I did have an opportunity to interact with Louis often because he wasn't just a 9-to-5 person. He was a person who was very ingrained in the day-to-day operations. So I worked rotating shifts, and there were times where literally, it's the end of your shift and you're seeing Louis there. So again, as a student, I really didn't realize the importance because Louis was just Louis. We knew him as the director, but he was someone who was really engaged, and he was someone who was really interested in the operational aspects of NMC. So I interacted or crossed paths with Louis several times throughout my career because, again, we both worked for the federal government, we both worked for NOAA, and even though I worked in 3 different line offices in NOAA, all of them in some way, shape, or form all pointed back to the National Weather Service because the National Weather Service is that forward-facing aspect of weather when it comes to the government. So yeah, so it was an awesome opportunity, and I know he retired just a couple of months ago, but I think it was like 40 plus years of service. So an awesome career.
And we've really enjoyed having him on. I think 3 times, Troy. We've had Louis on. And would love to have him back anytime. But then you did a stint in the River Forecast Center, right? Candace, was that right? The next thing you did?
Yeah, so I worked for the National Weather Service for 13 years. And so to give them a plug, there's so many different aspects where you can use your meteorology skills. So as I mentioned, I started as a student intern, then I worked as an operational meteorologist at 2 weather forecast offices. And then I switched and I worked at a river forecast center. And basically at a river forecast center, you have a lot of collaborative partnerships with the USGS, in some cases the EPA, working with different aspects of not only meteorology, but hydrology to forecast river levels. And as we all know, the most costly disaster is disasters that are the result of floods or flash floods. So I thought that was a really awesome opportunity for me to learn that aspect of meteorology. And then after that, I became the hydrology program manager for the National Weather Service Southern Region Headquarters. So I had oversight over 4 river forecast centers, 32 weather forecast offices, the hydrology program in those offices, and Puerto Rico as well. So it was 10 states and Puerto Rico, as well as the offices. So it was a great opportunity to, again, mix meteorology and also hydrology. And when I was at the Southern Region Headquarters, I was able to spearhead the Turnaround Don't Drown campaign, which was originally, the slogan came from a firefighter in Harlingen, Texas, during a spotter talk. But that WCM, his name was Hector Guerrero, he came to Southern Region Headquarters as a part of the ROC program. And Rick, you might have to help me with this. Is the Regional Operations Center, is that still the name of it? Okay, great. Again, this is a while back in my career. So Hector came, we were literally sitting down and having lunch, and he said, yeah, I have this great this great idea. And I was like, what's this great idea? And he tells me about this firefighter that said, we need to come up with a slogan like stop, drop, and roll, something like turn around, don't drown. And after that one conversation at lunch, I was able, as the hydrology program manager, to go from idea to implementation. So I didn't come up with the idea for turn around, don't drown. I want to make sure I give credit to the right people. But as the hydrology program manager, I was able to implement a flash flood and flood awareness campaign to help people avoid driving into flooded roadways. And so the first year it was for the state of Texas. The next year it was for the entire southern region, which was 10 states and Puerto Rico. And then it became a national campaign. So now that, even though I'm no longer in the National Weather Service, it's been maybe 17 years, I think, since it started, I still hear broadcast meteorologists, and I still hear or read operational meteorologists using that term, turn around, don't drown, in their call to action statement. So if there's anything that I'm really proud of, is that I may not have been the one who came up with the idea, but I was the catalyst that helped make that program a national program. And in that first year, just in Texas, there was a 23% drop in the number of what are called swift water rescues, where you have first responders who literally have to risk their lives going out and trying to save other people who have driven into flooded roadways. So that was just one aspect of how I was able to contribute to a small, idea and make it now a national common term that's used for flood and flash flood safety.
It's my go-to on all of my call to action statements whenever we're having flooding in Alabama. So it's really neat to know. And I want to get into your project management background in a little bit too. But I heard something that you said on the Clear Skies podcast, the AMS podcast, that really resonated with me. You said that water resources is the intersection of ethics, policy, and hydrology, and that just really popped with me when I heard you say that, because it's true. It's just not one aspect, but talk about the importance that policy and ethics play in that situation all across the country, in those areas where water is scarce. And even where it's not so scarce, like Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, where we deal with it on our border here, fights over the river.
That's a good point. So I know that the western third of the United States is in the midst of a very severe drought. And then you have the eastern third of the United States, like you said, have normal or even above normal precipitation rates. So how do you deal with this dichotomy? And I think that's where policymakers come in, especially in the West, where you have riparian rights and you're still trying to figure out who owns what water in which stream or which river. So again, you need people who understand the meteorology, but can apply that science to come up with rules and regulations that can help each and every one of us in our day-to-day lives. I think the challenge is that we usually hear about water when something goes awry or something's wrong. Flint, when I say Flint, Michigan, it's like everybody starts thinking of, the water or the lack of the water or the impurities in the water. And so when we think about, water and water rights and water policy, we also need to think about infrastructure. And what are we doing to make sure that communities have clean drinking water? I think it's something that we take for granted so often, because not necessarily the United States, but there are countries, literally entire countries, that don't have clear or safe drinking water. So policy, like you said, ethics, like you said, and then understanding the science and being able to translate that science into manageable and easy to understand information, so decision makers can make informed decisions. And I believe the Weather Service calls that impact-based decision making. So I think that's a crucial aspect when we think about hydrology and when we think about water.
We all were greatly impacted by Hurricane Katrina. Many of us were involved in the forecasting of it leading up to, and we're either at the Gulf Coast or watching very intently as that disaster unfolded. You had an important role in that event. Talk about that experience and some of the things you remember about it.
Yeah, so I was the on-site meteorologist during the 2005 landfall of Hurricane Katrina. So I provided around the clock forecast to Governor Blanco, her executive team, and also senior executives for 11 days before, during, and after the storm. And so, as I mentioned before, Southern Region Headquarters has what's called a ROC, a Regional Operations Center. And whenever there is impactful weather, I'll say it that way, they usually deploy individuals to certain areas to help again, help decision makers make the best decision possible. So at the time, of course, no one knew Hurricane Katrina was going to be what we know now today, that at the time it was the costliest disaster on record, causing billions of dollars. We know the levees couldn't hold the water. We know several areas of New Orleans flooded for weeks on end. And it was very personal to me because my father was born in New Orleans and I have a lot of relatives in that area as well. But at the time, I thought I was just going to help and do my job. And 11 days later, we now know the catastrophic damage that Hurricane Katrina left us. And so one, I really, thank the National Hurricane Center because again, I was repeating or I was translating the information that was already being provided. I didn't make my own forecast. I just provided them with the forecast that was provided from the National Weather Service. And the fact that the accuracy of the forecast in terms of Hurricane Katrina, in terms of the category, in terms of where it was going to land was spot on. That actually helped the situation so that they could try and mitigate and try and provide assistance as soon as possible. Now, was it perfect? Of course not. I mean, I think, there's so many documentaries about Hurricane Katrina and what could or would or should have been done. But I think at the end of the day, you had dedicated individuals who are trying to do all they could to try and help the situation. And that's what I remember more than anything is that I was in the Emergency Operations Center and you literally had first responders, you had meteorologists, you had people from various sectors all trying to work together to lessen the impact of this hurricane. But I think if we learned anything, or at least I learned anything, it's that we now need to shift from this mindset of prevention to preparedness, and then also from preparedness to resilience. So in other words, we need to start having communities get ready for the next big fill in the blank. It could be a heat wave, an ice storm, a thunderstorm, lightning, or a hurricane. The fact is we are seeing that we are having more impactful weather events, and we need to make sure that communities and individuals are prepared for it. So I think that that's the next big conversation is how do we enable communities to be prepared for that next big event?
Well, that's so critical. And I know just this past week, our hotels that were impacted by the tornado in December were immediately in the crosshairs of the ice storm. And those managers were on the phone, 4 days in advance, National Weather Service forecast in hand. And they wanted to know, is this going to be as bad as the 08 and 09 ice storm that Pat Spoden talked about a few weeks ago on the show? But they had plenty of time to do those extra things because of the good forecast. And, this event was not, while it was impactful, for them, it was not the same level of disaster that they experienced in 08 and 09 in that ice storm because they were ready. But I can remember that Saturday night as Hurricane Katrina was in the Gulf of Mexico, kind of in shock that New Orleans was not in a mandatory evacuation at that point. Talk back to those moments with Governor Blanco and Mayor Nagin, and that Saturday night, with Max Mayfield on the phone, it had to be a pretty tense and stressful situation.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I don't remember the exact details, but what I do remember is that the individuals were trying to do the very best they could with the information that they had at the time. And I think that was my takeaway, is that whenever there is a situation or a severe event of that nature, we want to be able to give them as much information as possible so they can make the right decisions. So obviously, like you said, there were a lot of things going on trying to evacuate people from New Orleans, because some people who are listening to this podcast may not understand that New Orleans is actually below sea level. So anytime you have any type of major flooding or copious amounts of rain, there is the chance of flooding, standing water for, in some cases, weeks or even months on end, as we saw in Hurricane Katrina. So not only do you have a weather event, but a weather event that can turn into a health event, because standing water can be very unhealthy. Again, you don't know what's swimming in the water. You don't know what type of pests can actually develop from standing water. And then actually, trying to wade through the water, you can injure yourself, or even trying to drink contaminated water can make you sick. So again, there's a domino effect when we have a lot of severe weather that we need to inform the public about as well. So that would be one of my takeaways from it, was that we need to make sure that we have information in an easy to understand manner, and we need to make sure that it is clearly translated so that people can make the best decisions.
Candace, got a question for you. It's also a weird system, because I still remember that Monday morning and sort of thinking that maybe New Orleans kind of dodged the bullet. And what was interesting is the north winds there. A lot of people still think it was water off the Gulf that came directly in and started filling the bowl. Well, what happened is those waters coming on to the south off Lake Pontchartrain, right, into those levees, which levee systems in Louisiana are another topic for another day. But at that point, it was kind of interesting that water came in from Lake Pontchartrain through those levees into the Ninth Ward and places like that, right?
Yeah, that is correct. The hurricane actually made landfall, and again, I probably don't have the exact coordinates, but it was east of Slidell, but west of the Mississippi border, like right in that area. So again, it was maybe about 30 to 50 miles east of New Orleans. So when you said dodge a bullet, you're absolutely right, because up until I think maybe about 48 hours before landfall, it was expected to make a direct hit to New Orleans. And then in fact, it shifted a little bit to the right. So, like you said, just 50 miles can mean the difference between whether or not your home is still standing, or in some cases your home was totally, lifted off of its foundation and it's no longer there. So again, when it comes to hurricanes and planning, these are the type of things that we need to let communities know so that they are aware and they can prepare for the next event.
I clearly remember that morning too, Troy, because someone in our group said, New Orleans has dodged a bullet. I think Shepard Smith or someone was broadcasting live from down there, and they were saying, "Oh, everything's fine in the French Quarter," and blah blah blah. And I saw that first flash flood warning come from the National Weather Service in Slidell, and it mentioned that a levee had been breached, which I'm sure turned out to be, one of the ones in the Lakeside district, probably right up there on the north side of New Orleans, like Troy's talking about. And I knew that really spelled trouble, and that will always stand out in my mind as
The thing that I remember, Bill, was that they mentioned, I remember saying the bowl is starting to fill because of this breach in the levee system. And it was sitting there, and in my mind, I'm sitting there going, okay, New Orleans, like Candace points out, is a bowl in a sense. And I said, we're off to the races now. This thing is not, we haven't dodged a bullet. And indeed, we found out we did not. So.
And then you wake up to the shocking, aerials the following morning, where it just my heart just sank. We were watching Good Morning America, I think, and these images of New Orleans were just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That was a terrible, terrible situation. Dr. Neal, I know you want to take us in a new direction here. Why don't you do that right now?
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about PCO and a program coordination office. So there's a program in NOAA, and NOAA is basically siloed into these different line offices. The Weather Service being a line office, and you got NESDIS, OAR, OMAO, Ocean Service. And in the office of the administrator, each line office has what they call a program coordination officer, which is they usually will pull in an early career professional, really the ultimate cream of the crop. Very, very smart, talented people. And I had the privilege to work with a handful when I was there. And it was an amazing experience for me. And I got to imagine it was an amazing experience for them. But the way it works is they're kind of the interface between the line office and the administrator's office. So they were the ones writing the memos. They were the ones relaying the information back and forth. Candace, you were one of the original PCOers, right? What was that like?
Yeah, I think PCO has been around for maybe about 20 years now. And I think I was one of those first cohorts or groups. And so, like Neil said, you basically spend a year working at NOAA headquarters, and you get to work with many of what we call our political appointees. And basically, you're just trying to advance knowledge and advance science, particularly with your particular line office. So for me, I was actually at Southern Region headquarters, and I was the first person outside of the Washington, D.C. area to receive an appointment from the National Weather Service director to be a part of PCO. And it was an awesome experience. It was really a humbling experience because, I walked in thinking, okay, I know all things weather. That's, I can do this. This is not a problem. And then you learn, oh, there's not just weather, there's fish. There's not just fish, there's satellites. Wait, there's not just satellites, there's oceans. And there's not just oceans, there's research, which actually spans all of them. Oh, and let me not forget our NOAA Corps, which many people don't know is an active arm of our military. So again, I think it was an awesome experience. I mean, you work 10 to 12-hour days, and I'm not saying that I don't want anyone to become disinterested in PCO. I think it was a great experience, but the time flew by because you're spending so much time serving as that interface between NOAA headquarters and also with your particular line office. And then I'll say for me, you always had to have a backup. And the reason why was that you were always working on the next big event. The next big event could be, traveling with the NOAA administrator. The next big event could be creating talking points. The next big event could be traveling to the Hill while someone gives a testimony. So you're always working on the next best thing or the next big thing. And so for us, we always had a backup. So my backup was NESDIS, long acronym. It's the satellite arm of NOAA, and it's the National Environmental Satellite Data and Information Service. So not only did I get, this new education about all of NOAA and what NOAA does, in addition to the National Weather Service, I also formed a very intimate relationship with NESDIS, because anytime the NESDIS PCO person was out of the office, I now covered 2 different line offices. And so as a result of that, at the end of my year, which was supposed to be a detail, I ended up staying in the Washington, D.C. area, and I switched from the National Weather Service, and I started working at NOAA, NESDIS, NOAA Satellites, as an executive officer for the assistant administrator and the deputy assistant administrator, because I literally was on the phone with them on a daily basis whenever the NESDIS PCO person was out of the office. So again, it's just an example of being open to new possibilities and just understanding that your skill set, can be transferable at any time. And especially now, because I know I was reading an article called The Great Resignation, where more and more people are starting to resign and starting to go after the careers that they really want. I think that was something that I didn't realize until, just reading the article, that everyone needs to have a transferable skill set. So it's not just about meteorology. It's not just about getting good grades. And it's not just about going to work and doing a good job. It's other aspects of your career and of your job that really make the difference. And one of those is having a skill set that can be used in more than one setting.
Yeah, the way you describe it, it's so valuable. I gotta imagine, like PCO, I probably drove them crazy. It was nights, weekends, it was 18 to 20-hour days. It was pretty relentless. But they got to go to all the meetings. They went to the Hill. They were in everything and heard a lot of really high level discussions. And, like you say, it's not just the satellites and the fish, but it's also politics and budget. And you really get to see how the sausage is made from the inside. And it's got to be a pretty eye-opening experience, especially when you're early in your career. Let me skip ahead a little bit. while I'm on the line of questions, with particularly with respect to research. So you were, I think, at some point when we first crossed paths, you were deputy director of the Office of Weather and Air Quality, and that I think was about the same time that Bill LaPenta was the head of INSEP, but it's come over to do a detail with me. What was it like working at that office? And that was, you were there when the name changed to WPO, or?
Right. Yeah, so the Office of Weather and Air Quality renamed itself, and it's now known as the Weather Program Office. And it was truly an awesome experience because you're working on what's called R2O, research to operations, but also O2R, operations to research. So the point is that we have no shortage of great ideas when it comes to atmospheric science, but understanding how to go from idea to implementation is really important. And that's what the Office of Weather and Air Quality was all about. So we had not only contractors and federal employees, we had people from entry level all the way up to PhDs. And it was truly an eclectic mix of diverse mindsets that was working on advancing meteorology. Now, you mentioned Bill LaPenta, and yes, I had the awesome opportunity to work with him for 3 months. I'm sure many of you know that he did pass away suddenly in 2019. And overnight, I went from the deputy director to being both the deputy director and the acting director for about 9 months. And so, working with Bill was awesome because of his mindset and because of, like you said, his political savvy and his way of just approaching things. And I know that, I didn't know him, but I remember distinctly in our first meeting, he literally said to me, "I don't want you to work for me. I want you to work with me." And, I think that really impacted me because, leadership is something that I think a lot of us take for granted. And for, a leader or the person who's the head of an office to, be charismatic, to be understanding, to be empathetic, but also to have a really sharp scientific mind to advance programs like EPIC and the other 10 national programs that we had in the office. It was truly awesome. So I know we lost a great, great scientific mind with Bill, and I'm just proud that I had the chance to work with him for a few months.
He was an amazing guy. I was listening to a couple of the talks at his memorial session at AMS. And I remember when I first went to some of those meetings when he went over to that office, and I was really, really impressed with how diverse that office was compared to a couple most of the other offices that I interfaced with. What was he like from, I guess, you always hear all these stories about how inspiring he was and everything else, but what about like from an inclusivity perspective? I know that I've talked to a lot of people, particularly Danae, who share stories about how much of a positive impact Bill had, not just on his career, but on his confidence. And
yeah, absolutely. Even though I only knew him for a couple of months, he mentored me. And it's because of him, he nominated me for an award that I won in 2020. I was awarded the Black Engineer of the Year Award for career government achievement, and it's because he nominated me. So I think that just speaks to Bill, is that Bill tries to see the best in everyone. And I'm sorry, I'm still talking present tense, but he was that type of person to see the best in individuals and try and to nurture people and to listen. And I know listening sounds like it's such a cliche and you hear people say it all the time, but for someone to truly take an interest in you and what you want to do and what your future goals are, that's invaluable. And so that's one of the things that I was able to see with Bill, and so many people saw with Bill as well, because he left a legacy of individuals to follow in his footsteps and to continue to advance science.
So I want to pull on the R to O thread. And I remember it seems like even though we were there at the same time, 2/3 of my tenure was virtual because of the pandemic. But one of the last things I remember doing in person was we had an award ceremony in Silver Spring for that office. And I remember you were saying some words about research to operations that really stuck in my mind, because I always think of research to operations as transitioning code and really on a technical level. But you said you started talking about building consensus and acceptance and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like being what I would consider to be an extrovert and building consensus when it comes to the R2O challenge?
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, so here's a shocker. I'm actually an introvert. So for any of you who took the Myers-Briggs test, I'm like an ISTJ. But what I tell people is that, I turn myself into an extrovert while I'm at work, and then I go back to my introverted ways. So you're absolutely right that I think what was great about the Office of Weather and Air Quality and now the Weather Program Office is that you had a lot of people who came from different backgrounds, who had different ideas, but who wanted to work together to further science. So one key aspect, I think, of the office is partnerships, is that in order to have research to operations or operations to research, you have to have the end game in mind. And so not just waiting until the end of the research project to include someone, but having that stakeholder, having that end user be a part of the process, beginning, in the middle, and then also in the end. And that's one of the things that I thought was really great about the Office of Weather and Air Quality is that we worked across those silos that you mentioned, working into different line offices. We worked with academia. We worked with other federal partners as well, because no one group or, not a few individuals can do all of the work that we were doing, but we needed partnerships in order to do that as well. So I think that's what my takeaway was, is that you had really dedicated individuals that were willing to work, collaborate, come to consensus, and ultimately continue to work to reach the goal.
I gotta chime in here first, probably before everybody else, but yeah, I'm an introvert too. A month or two ago, Kim made me take that online Myers-Briggs thing, and I think I was like IJST or whatever. The exact opposite of Kim is the only thing I remember.
Well, I'm sure if we went around, most of us would probably be introverts, because that's what they said most meteorologists are. Most meteorologists are actually introverts.
Yeah.
So
that's exactly what I was about to chime in and say. I'm an introvert, but I can't remember what my Myers-Briggs was, but I had an interesting one. But I'm introverted, which is great to be on radio, because then I can still just talk to myself.
Yeah.
Perfect. Love it.
Yeah, I often think I got the wrong job because I'm hardcore introvert. I went to the executive leadership seminar at the training center. And of all the people there, I scored the most introverted. That night I went to dinner. Do you know John Gordon? Anybody know John Gordon?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He was the most extroverted. So we had an interesting dinner that night. I was exhausted.
Right.
But yeah, I think a lot of meteorologists are introverts and kind of gravitate toward that, working with data and, but the WCM is not the right job for an introvert sometimes, I think. But I fake my way through it pretty good.
You turn it on for work, Rick. That's what's important. I don't think you get to be an introvert around John Gordon. If you were for a while, you won't be for very long.
No.
So that's really fascinating. Now, I wanted to touch on the fact that you won the Charles Anderson Award, because you mentioned, inclusiveness being an important part of finding a good job environment. Dr. Jacobs mentioned it. We all know how important that concept is. Talk about that award and what that meant to you to receive it.
Yeah, that was an awesome honor. And so I really appreciate my colleagues for nominating me for the award. And basically the Charles Anderson Award is for career achievement in diversity and inclusion. And so in so many spaces, I was either the youngest, the first African-American, the first female, or some combination of that three in every single one of my positions during my entire career. So I know what it feels like to be the only. I know what it feels like to be in a space that you don't feel like you are included. And I want to, if anything, try and create a space where people who follow behind me can feel like they are a part of the group. And so going back to what Neil said, that was one of the great things about the Office of Weather and Air Quality. And, you know, before Bill LaPenta as the director, it was Dr. John Cortines. And I think that that's one of the things that they really tried to instill, both of them, is that we need a culture that is representative of the communities that we serve. And so we need to have programs and have, you know, incentives to try and encourage more people to pursue a career in atmospheric science, and showing them that, you know, it's more than being a broadcaster, or maybe it's more than being an operational meteorologist, but there's so many ways that you can use meteorology for the greater good.
And that's interesting, very, very interesting there, Dr. Boyd. Talk about June Bacon-Bursey for a moment, if you can, because the AMS last year named its broadcast award for her. And I thought that she had, like you, a very amazing and encouraging career.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm not going to quote years because somebody's going to need to fact check me, but I believe she was the first African-American broadcast meteorologist. And she was in the New York area. Am I correct? Somebody fact check me. But the point is that she was a pioneer. That I can say unequivocally. She was a pioneer in her own right. And so she became a broadcaster in a day and time where people who looked like me were not expected to be in scientific roles. When you did see people who looked like me, they were in non-scientific roles, or you maybe saw them on television in entertainment or sports, those type of fields. So for her, not only to be an African-American female, but to be a meteorologist and to be a trusted person that people would tune into and listen to on a daily basis about their forecast, that was phenomenal all in itself. So I'm really excited that the AMS decided to honor her by naming the broadcast award after her. And I believe there was one recipient. The AMS conference was just a couple of weeks ago. I don't remember the name of the recipient, but there was one in that category. So hopefully we'll have several more to follow on.
And have you studied the story of Jim Tillman, Dr. Boyd?
I haven't, so you're gonna have to tell me about it.
Yeah, Nate Johnson wrote about this in his president's newsletter to the NWA last year, and I clipped it out because I wanted to keep it, you know, front and center. But he told the story of Jim Tillman, who graduated college and served in the military, went on to a decades-long career flying for American Airlines. He was only their third African-American pilot in history, and he was quite frequently mistaken, you know, for a sky cap or a flight attendant, you know, because people just didn't see an African-American in that role then, kind of tragically. But he went on to a decades-long second career as a broadcaster in Chicago. He started out hosting a program focusing on Black issues and people, and then, you know, went on to be an on-air air forecaster, weather presenter, and aviation analyst in the 1970s. Awesome. He passed away last year, and Nate memorialized him in his newsletter. And I thought, that's somebody I want to learn more about too, because that's another amazing story.
Awesome. That is a great story. And I think there are so many stories about those who are making contributions to the field of atmospheric science. I wish we had a way to highlight everyone, but I think that would take a long, long time. We need a lot of podcasts for that. So
yes, we would. That's for sure. So all those things are really fun. Dr. Jacobs talked about R2O for a second. You've used a lot of your skills in public administration, and in project management, in the RON, which we've had you on talking about before. Mm-hmm. Talk about where the RON is right now and how it's gone this year and your experience within it.
Yeah, well, first, the RON was named after Ron Problinski, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. He was a SOO, which was a science and operations officer in St. Louis. And so when he passed away, to honor him and his efforts to combine the operations world and the research world, we created the RON, Research Operation Nexus. And I really need to give credit to Greg Stump, because he's, again, I'm this type of person you're going to notice. I'm not the first to come up with something, but once I take it, I can take it and run with it. But Greg was the one who created the very first RON, Research Operations Nexus. And I believe there was 9 under his belt to date. And then he transferred the, belt, so to speak, over to me. And so I have been leading the RON for both the NWA and also the AMS, National Weather Association and American Meteorological Society. And all of the ones that I have shared have been virtual. So one of the great things about virtual is that you don't necessarily have to be in the same room in order to contribute. So we've had people from as far away as Guam participate in the RON. And basically it's kind of like speed dating for meteorologists, kind of. I think that's the best way to describe it. But what it is that you literally, you have virtual tables, or in this case, since we're in the virtual environment, virtual breakout rooms, and you bring together operationalists and you bring together researchers to talk about different topics. And we talked about a wide variety of topics, anywhere from aviation, severe weather, storms, drought, different forecasting methods, and yes, even diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, DEIA, which is one of the pillars of the current administration. So it's a great opportunity just to hear what are the best practices and to understand what are the emerging technologies that we should be focusing on. So one of the things that we did now that I'm chair is we literally took all of the notes and all of the conversations from the past 10 years, collated that into a document, and we presented that to National Weather Service officials. Because again, this information is too good just to, just lay on the table. We want to make sure that the information is used to be driven or to move science forward in some way, shape, or form. So the next RON, hopefully, fingers crossed, will be at the next in-person NWA event. Now, I don't have any idea if that's even going to be. I think we need to wait for an NWA official to tell us that. But again, our goal is to try and have one at the NWA annual event, and then also to have one at the annual AMS event. So fingers crossed, that's my hope, but we will hopefully find out more information in the upcoming months.
Well, I hear we're really close, so hopefully we will learn that very soon. Talk about, I want to hit a couple things really fast. I know we're running long, and I knew we would, but talk about a typical day for you at NSF right now. What you do.
Absolutely. So I started at the National Science Foundation in August of 2020 in the midst of the pandemic. And I served as the Deputy Division Director for the Division of Grants and Agreements. And so many people will probably say, hey, you're a meteorologist. Why are you dealing with grants? Well, as I mentioned in my previous position, research to operations, we actually funded $20 million worth of grants a year in various topics like social science and S2S, subseasonal to seasonal. We also had a hurricane supplemental that we were working on as well to fund likewise. And then EPIC, the Earth Prediction Innovation Center, that I'm sure Neil is very familiar with. It was actually birthed in the office as well. So taking that knowledge, I was able to serve as the Deputy Division Director. And at the National Science Foundation, my office processed $5 billion, and that's billion with a B, $5 billion in grants and 12,000 new grants a year. And that was on an annual basis. And so in August of 2021, I became the strategic advisor for the National Science Foundation. And that's what I've been doing for about the past 6 months or so. And I've been working on cross-functional activities. And so again, I just want to really emphasize that, meteorology can be used in so many different ways that we need to, again, know what our skill sets are and be able to apply them in different groups and from different vantage points as well. So a typical day for me, and I hate to say this out loud, is a lot of meetings. I mean, I'm like you, I've been working virtually for almost 2 years now. So I was telling everybody at the beginning of the podcast that, my bedroom doubles as my office. And so, I'm usually in back-to-back meetings throughout the day, a lot of collaboration. We try to build consensus. It's an awesome group of individuals. And many people don't know that the NSF is about 1,600 individuals. So 1,600 individuals responsible for over $8 billion worth of funding. And about 60% of all colleges and universities receive some type of grant or funding from the National Science Foundation. So it is an awesome honor to work with such extraordinary folks. And so it's just another aspect of my 28-year career in federal government.
That's outstanding. I've got one more before James wraps us up. Dr. Boyd, tell us about Professor Steam and your book.
Oh yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to do is, again, help that next generation of individuals. And one of the things that I did was I wanted to really reach out to young individuals who have an interest in weather, because that's how I was. I know I told you the story about how I became a meteorologist, but let me just tell you really quickly how I even got interested in weather. And so that was, a day in like early January, February. I told you before that I'm from Chicago. We were all sitting in my family room and we were all watching the Bears, which is the football team in that area. And I remember that there was, a storm brewing outside. Now it's January or February. So what I later learned was thunderstorms, thunder snow, that's what was the actual meteorological term, was actually moving overhead. And so what actually happened in late January, early February, was that a bolt of lightning came from the clouds, hit the tree in my front yard, went down into the ground, connected with the electrical system, came straight into the house and blew up my dad's prized color TV. Now, most of my family members were mourning the loss of the TV and the fact that they couldn't watch the Bears game, but I was looking outside. And what used to be our tree was now split straight down the middle, and there was like a little, wisp of smoke still coming up from the top of it. And that to me was my first real thoughts about weather. Like, how could energy from the sky come to the tree and blow out the TV? I started asking a lot of questions. And I think that's what most kids are. They're curious and they ask a lot of questions. So now to go to your question about Professor Steam, that is, I'm a published author, and I created books for specifically toddlers from the age of 2 to 5 to start learning about weather. And so it's a great opportunity to create that next pipeline of STEAM enthusiasts. So STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And I was able to publish that book again during the pandemic. So again, going back to what I said before, it's about having a skill set, having a marketable skill set, and just trying to encourage others to pursue careers in STEAM.
Yeah, I got to jump in here and say awesome books. My two boys love them. Autograph copies. So thank you. Very, very much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So Candace, let's say that we've got a high school senior listening to this show that wants to do something in the weather enterprise, following your footsteps. What's some good advice for a 17, 18-year-old kid that's looking at college in their future?
Well, one, that person's very privileged. Because if we look at the statistics now, we have up to 30% of our population that can't even afford to go to college. So if that person's thinking about college, we want to enable them, and we want to give them every possible opportunity to pursue a college degree. Because I don't know about you, but I really didn't immerse myself and learn about meteorology until my junior year of college. So not only do you have to figure out how to get to college and how to pay and how to fund it, but then you have to make sure that you're at least successful for those first couple of years before you actually take the actual meteorology courses. Now, that may have changed because, again, I went to school in the 90s, so who knows? Some of the curriculum might have changed. But if I'm talking to a high school student right now, I would say be curious. I would say ask questions, and I would say be open to the possibilities, because again, there are so many avenues that you can take meteorology. And again, sometimes people limit themselves to just what you read in a textbook, or again, like me, what I was able to see on TV. So for our next generation, I say go for it. I think there are awesome opportunities, especially when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. I feel that we are creating more inclusive environments for everyone. And so I think the future is bright for anyone who wants to pursue a meteorology degree. I would say go for it. I would say, try and find funding opportunities like grants and scholarships. I would say also, like we said before, intern. You want to make sure that you're trying new things out and seeing what works best for you. And then networking. I didn't even know the word networking until later in my career. But understanding that this world is a little smaller than we think, especially when it comes to meteorology. I think people say it's 6 degrees of separation. So basically, you know someone who knows someone who knows someone. So it's really important to build your network as early as possible. And then the last thing, which I didn't really hear us talk about, but I'll say briefly, is mentoring. Because I really didn't have a mentor until very late in my career. I didn't know what mentoring was. And I mean, sometimes mentoring happens organically. It's just two people and they just form a bond and they become like a mentor and a mentee. Sometimes it's a more structured environment where you'll actually have a program offered by maybe your company or maybe the university itself. But the point is, no person is an island, and that we all need someone to help us get to the next step. And we need to understand the culture that we're in. And I just sometimes wonder, if I had a mentor earlier in my career, what differences would I have now? So if there's anything to tell that high school person, is that find someone who's in the meteorology field and find a mentor. I think that is the most crucial step in becoming a successful person in atmospheric science.
And the process too, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And changes will happen. You talked about you dabbled in television, and that wound up not being it. And as you said, a door closes, another one opens. So being flexible, I think, too, is pretty important, don't you think?
Absolutely. And like I said before, marketable skills. As simple as it sounds, being able to talk and being able to present technical information in a clear and understandable manner. That's a skill. That's a skill that I wish more of us had. And I'm so glad that we have these platforms that we can talk about these issues. And so I agree with you that it's understanding what your passion is, making your passion into your career, and having that skill set that can be used by so many. I think that's really important.
Awesome. So we have to take a break here. So Candace, if anybody wants to get in touch with you or follow you, what's the best way to do that? Or do you dabble in social media?
I do. I think the fastest way to connect with me is LinkedIn. So you can look for LinkedIn Candace Boyd. Other than that, I do have other platforms, but that's the platform where, especially if someone wants to know more about atmospheric science or wants to connect with me in that respect, that's probably the fastest way for them to reach me.
And you're an author, so how can people buy your books?
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about that. You can go to professorsteam.org. So all one word, professorsteam.org.
Awesome. Well, Candace, if you can stick around, we'd love to have you do that. But if you have to go, we understand that too. But we've got to take a break and do a couple of recorded segments. And we're going to bring in Bruce here in just a second. But again, thank you. This was a great segment. Appreciate your energy and your passion and the things you've done for the Weather Enterprise. So thanks a lot for being on the show this evening. Let's go to Tony Rice and his astronomy report. We've got Jen. And this week in tornado history, we'll come back with Weather Roundup, picks of the week, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
The U.S. Coast Guard launched an investigation last week into what led to a Royal Caribbean cruise ship, the Harmony of the Seas, to scrub a SpaceX launch attempt from Cape Canaveral, Florida. Just before the scheduled 6:11 p.m. launch time, the massive cruise liner, the third largest passenger ship afloat, sailed into the hazard area defined by the Coast Guard and Space Force, forcing the cancellation. So why did this happen? That's what the Coast Guard will be asking. But one thing that's worth noting here is that we're going to be seeing a lot more polar launches from Florida. This was the fourth in as many weeks. Polar orbits allow a satellite to see the entire Earth as it rotates beneath, and they're particularly good for science missions. New technology has enabled more southerly launches, which fly nearly parallel to the Florida coast, a trajectory that was previously available only from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. But it also makes for a larger potential impact to air and sea traffic along the southeastern coast of Florida. So why launch from Florida right next to a busy port? Well, it's cheaper than California, in large part because of greater infrastructure availability in and around Cape Canaveral. Captains in the air and sea are made very aware of these hazard areas in the form of notices to airmen, or NOTAMs, which are issued by the FAA, indicating those temporary no-fly zones. Pilots, especially those flying in and out of Orlando and Miami, are very familiar with these restrictions and see them pop up and move as weather, or in this case boats, force these kind of 24-hour scrubs. The boat version is called Notices to Mariners, or NOTMARS, and they're issued by the Coast Guard. So why couldn't the launch wait until this boat moved? Rocket launches are scheduled for a time when the launch pad is in the right place to get to the right orbit. That happens just once a day. Some rockets have varying abilities to steer back into that right trajectory. SpaceX's Falcon 9 is not one of them. Its launch windows are generally instantaneous ones, meaning they're a second long. Miss your shot today and you get to come back tomorrow, just shy of 24 hours later, when the Earth has rotated your launch pad back into the right place. Elsewhere in the sky, look for Venus in the pre-dawn sky this week. It's shining at its brightest. It's also at the highest above the horizon, making it easier to see. On Saturday morning, it will be just 7 degrees away from the redder and dimmer Mars. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokey for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, a squall line moved through Texas and produced 4 significant tornadoes on February 8th, 1935. At tornadotalk.com, we have a detailed summary about the deadliest tornado to occur. It was an F2 that tracked from near Nineveh through Grapeland along the 24.6-mile path. 12 people were killed, 70 others were injured. The Murray Plantation was laid to waste. The tornado first developed 12 miles northeast of Centerville near Nineveh. It roared through the Story and Darcy Plantation, where several tenant homes and a commissary were leveled. 15 people were injured. The funnel then crossed the Trinity River and roared into the Murray Cotton Plantation. Arch Murray, his wife, and 3 children were eating dinner when their house began to shake and they heard the wind howling. They took cover in a room on the east side of the house, and that was the only part that was left standing. Tragically, others on the farm were not as lucky. One woman was thrown 400 feet from her leveled cabin. A man was, quote, sawed in half when he was thrown through a barbed wire fence. 11 people were killed at the plantation. 50 others were injured. Another woman was killed at the nearby Herman Beasley farm. For our summary, we were able to find the names of the 12 people who died. We try to do that as much as we can to honor those who passed away. Please check out our summary at tornadotalk.com.
All right, well, let's see if by chance we've got an email or two this week.
Letters, we get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All right, we have an email from just a week ago from Richard Cook, our friend in the UK, and he was talking about the Sunday storm of Corey that hit the UK, and where I live in Stornoway, the winds hit 92 miles per hour. In the space of 15 minutes, the wind rose from 23 miles per hour to 92 miles per hour, according to the UK Met Office, causing damage to trees, power lines, and houses. One of the most abrupt wind shifts I have ever seen. So he wanted to share that storm report for us. And then we have one more from our friend Chris White. Has there been any discussions on WeatherBrains recently, the last 5 years or so, on the potential for public-private partnerships to deploy and maintain local weather radars? C-band ? Better coverage of radar gaps would seem to be of value to many commercial interests as well as state and local governments. So that was the question. Have we talked about that much?
Not as much as we probably should have. It'd be a good conversation to get started with Dr. Neil Jacobs. I bet he has some opinions on this.
Yeah, I mean, there's companies out there that have the capability and deployable radars filling in the gaps. I think it's a perfect thing to look at. Maybe potentially through the Mesonet program or something like that, commercial data buys, things like that.
Yeah, there's several of those radars around the country that the data is used kind of informally by the Weather Service. We have a city in southeast Oklahoma that's buying their own radar and putting it in. So it's certainly be an interesting topic. There's a Missouri one. There's one in University of Louisiana Monroe has one. So it could be an interesting topic, I think.
Cool. I think we should explore that. We had a couple other emails that came in. One has to do with James's pick of the week, so I'll let him talk about that in a little bit. But everybody, thank you so much for writing and sharing. We have a lot of folks who just have really shared their heart with us about how much WeatherBrains means to them. And we really appreciate you listening to us every week. And some people go back and binge listen to all of us in our quirky things that we're talking about here, and they really get some joy out of it. Please know how much we enjoy doing this every week. We are joyful to be able to share our lives and to be able to just to bring people on the show like Candace, who just was a light tonight, sharing her life and such an encouragement. So thank you for listening. Please send us an email at weatherbrains.com with your comments and questions. And then also please sign up for our weekly newsletter. Bill has got something special brewing this week, I'm sure, because he has the article this week we've had some great articles, great history, astronomy report, and more on our weekly newsletter that I send out every Thursday morning. So sign up for that. You can click on the link on our website.
Yeah, Jen's going to be as bald as me and Span here if I keep sending those reports into her late like I do every week. So she's like the teacher waiting on the assignment right there at the 11th hour. Sorry about that, Jen, but
that's okay. No, I love you.
We will get them to you. Because I was just thinking that very same thing. Well, you said in your segment, Jen. While I was thinking while we were talking to Candace, I wonder if anybody out there realizes, we would just do this show if nobody were listening. The listeners are all just a bonus, because we get as much out of the show every week as I hope they do. And, so that we love doing it. And that's why it's so much fun. Part of the reason we get to do it are people like the AMS and Midland Weather Radio. Bruce Jones is back with us. Last minute deal there. Bruce, I'm glad we got you on tonight. Nothing like waiting till the last minute to we'll start tonight, Bruce.
Yeah. Well, it's good to be here. Good to be back.
And Bruce, a week ago, well, not quite a week ago, just 4 days ago, I was standing in a city council meeting in Georgia, talking about a project and watching my phone, and worried that a tornado that was in West Central Alabama might eventually affect the Birmingham area. James, you were talking about before the show started. About the family who had a member who lost their life. Talk about that for a moment. What happened there and what a tragedy that is that's so avoidable.
Yeah, and again, anytime somebody dies in a tornado, it's just not excusable. It's a failure somewhere. And I know that there's always going to be tornado fatalities, but in the case of what happened last Thursday, there was an excellent warning, and even prior to the warning issued for this particular county, we did our best to message to people that you can't be in a mobile home. You can't be in a car. You've got to do something about it now. And we had one person killed in a mobile home. We had 3 people in the mobile home critically injured. The mobile home was picked up and carried across the street. And at this point, I don't know exactly the circumstances. And now's not the time for that. You don't need to be doing that research now. The dead need to be buried. You need to give people a time to mourn, but when it's all over, we need to go in and find out what happened. And if I had to guess, they probably never heard the warning. Maybe they were watching, something on YouTube or Netflix, and they didn't have local broadcast television on. They're not going to hear a siren, and they didn't have a weather radio. And so if that's the case, a weather radio would have saved a life and prevented 3 people from being critically injured because they would have gotten out of there. So that's how important this is to me. And again, I don't know if that's the exact situation, but we'll find out later. But I have a hunch that was the case.
And James, what would you think the weather radio penetration is in rural Hale County, even though they have an outstanding transmitter at Demopolis?
Probably 5% or less. I'd say, and again, that's based on, we've done some informal research, not really scientific based research, but I'd say in that particular part of the state, it's 5% or less. People have the siren mentality, the notion that you're going to hear some World War II air raid siren, that's 8 miles down the road during a raging storm. And we've got to fight that. And I'm going to fight that until the day I die. And the baseline for every home, it's a weather radio. It doesn't rely on cell service. People say, well, we don't have reliable cell service. Well, so what? It has nothing to do with that. Yeah. And again, we've got to work on getting the penetration levels higher. We have to.
And right here is exactly what you need. Sitting on my shelf, ready to go in my hotel in Virginia when it opens in 4 weeks is this Midland Weather Radio. Bruce, I had an interesting experience. I don't know if you followed. We had a Christmas show, and Ken Osborne, a local voiceover artist, did a great job reading a Christmas story that one of our listeners shared with us. Beautifully written piece, and he did a fantastic job reading this. But he mentioned in some of our conversations that he and his wife Charlotte didn't have a programmed weather radio. And, I just I jotted a note down, and right after Christmas, Elle ran over, we picked up a copy, a couple of these at the local, pharmacy, and $29, you can't beat it. You're going to even give our listeners an even better special in a minute. But we programmed that and delivered it to Ken and Charlotte, and I would have thought that we had taken them a Lamborghini, because I think they got more joy out of that weather radio because both of them were blind. And so talk about the special features that you got for folks that might have an impairment like that. And then I know you got a special feature for WeatherBrains listeners still. And James probably does the same graphic if we can use it, Bruce.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Consumer Electronics Association back around 2009 established the public alert certification. And they decided if these devices were truly going to be life-saving devices, there needed to be certification for the quality of them. And they need to have specifications for how loud the alert tone is. They need to have specifications for how they can alert the deaf and hard of hearing. Specifications for the addition of strobes and pillow shakers that you can plug into the back of the radio. And back in the old days, when a lot of the mobile homes were completely metal and you got very poor radio reception inside a mobile home, public alert certification said you have to have an input for an external antenna. So you could run an antenna outside the home. And we still have a lot of emergency managers who use those in their underground emergency management office down at the county courthouse. They'll run an antenna out the outside. But these devices were designed to be life-saving indoor tornado sirens. And so they're specified. The manufacturer of them is specified. And they are proven life-saving devices. So as you said, it's always a disappointment to me as a meteorologist and somebody who's been in broadcasting a long, long time and who's been talking about this stuff a long, long time. It's disappointing to find out how few people have taken advantage of this system. But it's run by the National Weather Service. President Gerald Ford, back around 1974, assigned it as our official federal warning system. So, I mean, this is an official federal system. It was designed to be an indoor tornado siren to save your life. And it is disappointed in a way and disheartening to find out how few people take advantage of it. I don't know. We talk and we talk and we talk, but unfortunately, after a big tornado or a big disaster, then people finally get it. And then they go out, oh yeah, we need to have a weather radio. But I just wish that we could get the message out before the disaster and not so much afterwards.
And Bruce, we have an interesting situation in the Birmingham Metro right now because our weather radio is operating at a degraded level because of an antenna problem. But the really neat thing is the Weather Service in Birmingham is really promoting, that there are alternate stations to monitor. And they've got a graphic out. If you're in Jefferson County, you can listen to Chehaw or Tuscaloosa or Aniana, and even the National Weather Service in Huntsville is providing alert and alarm tone service for Blunt from the Coleman transmitter, until this issue is resolved. So the system is somewhat flexible. And can be configured as it needs to handle a situation like this.
Yeah, originally there was only one channel. There was 162.550, and those original transmitters, including the one in New York City, that New York City transmitter at 162.550 just celebrated last year its 70th birthday. 70.
Oh, my goodness.
70. And so then as weather radio got a little more popular, they added two more channels. So then they had three frequencies. And then after the Piedmont, Alabama tornado, the Palm Sunday tornado, when Vice President Al Gore said these things need to be as common as smoke detectors, well, then we came up with 7 frequencies. And so these frequencies nationwide are kind of staggered. And so you're right. They can take a frequency A and kind of let it penetrate into frequency B if there's something wrong with frequency B. So these things are staggered, and the coverage in the United States now is about 95% of the US population can receive a signal from a NOAA weather radio transmitter. And it would have made all the difference in Piedmont, would have made all the difference just the other night in your neck of the woods. So we just need to keep reminding people, because even though the system's been around for 70 years, people still forget about it, or maybe they just don't think about it. We do have a special promo code for you on weather products and accessories. Just go to midlandusa.com. You'll get 25% off using the promo code SPAN25. And that's just a special offer. It's for you, for your family. If you'd like to give these things as gifts, they make wonderful gifts, wedding gifts, birthday presents, Christmas, Mother's Day, Father's Day. Weather radio is one of those devices that can save someone's life, and they'll thank you for years and years and years for thinking of them. So midlandusa.com, 25% off when you use the promo code SPAN25. Appreciate the opportunity to come on.
Stress, Bruce, that again, this does not have anything to do with the cell network. This is an independent RF network that is extremely reliable, and the coverage is excellent. And in like the WR120, you got a battery backup. If the power goes out, it just keeps on working. And the reliability factor is really, really strong here. And this is the baseline. And sure, you take your phone with you when you leave and you've got that, but at your house, at your business, at your house of worship, church, you need one of these things. And it's just stunning how many people don't have one here in 2022. So again, we want to ask you if you're, and again, people that listen to the show, you're weather dweebs, but be an ambassador for us and tell your friends and your relatives and your neighbors about this, and they can get 25% off. So it's a great chance to do that. And again, we're in the season here. Our season is November through May, but obviously the season really cranks up for some in spring and then summer in parts of the high plain states. So it's a great time. So Bruce, it is so great to have you back because this is such an important thing. Thank you.
Well, thank you, James. I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you all for tuning into WeatherBrains. Appreciate it.
All right, so let's do a quick weather roundup here. Rick Smith, is winter over? Are we done?
Are you kidding?
Here?
I would never. I would never say that. But God, I know a lot of people wish it was, but I don't think we're there yet. But certainly this week in our area, we're going to enjoy a nice break from what we saw last week. Last week was all winter storms and sleet and freezing rain and snow and sub-zero wind chills. This week we're going to be in the 60s, and some parts of the state may be up in the 70s. So nobody's complaining about the weather this week. It's a nice break from what we had to deal with last week, not just here, but in Texas and Kansas and all around the area. So yeah, we're enjoying the quiet.
Notice Alaska's pretty cold in the interior, and then typically when you see that cold air up there, at some point it's got to move. And this is only the 7th of February here. I mean, goodness, we got a long way to go. In fact, down here in our part of the world, some of the biggest snows have occurred in March and early April. So, we've got a long way to go. Neil, what's your thoughts on the rest of the winter season?
I think we're gonna have a pretty dynamic spring. It's gonna warm up here at least for the next few days, but then there's some models that are waffling a little bit with another coastal low on Valentine's Day. It doesn't quite have the upper level support yet, but if that trough gets any more negative tilt, we might actually get a decent storm along the coast. But I think that's what happens. You get that energy when it shifts in the spring, and the temperature gradient fights it out.
It makes me nervous when Neil says we're going to have a dynamic spring. I mean, that makes me very nervous.
It's minus 50 on the north coast of Alaska tonight. James, right now, minus 27.
The wind chill indices up there have been down to like minus 90 today. Look at the Weather Service Fairbanks and their wind chill graphic. We had a minus 91 Fahrenheit wind chill up there, and that's just brutal. But Jen, real quick, your thoughts on the rest of the winter season. What do you think?
I think that this is just I love this quiet week, but I think we're going to ramp it back up. It's been already a busy winter, and I think it's just going to continue. That looks like to be the trend. And here closer to home, I'm excited to be above freezing on Wednesday, and maybe we can get some of this yucky snow ice pack out of here. We may hit 40 on Friday, but it was a dream being on the radio today. It was so different than last week. The analyzing from last week was just really difficult, but this week's been much better. Yeah, I think it's going to be busy. I have to agree with Neil.
And
And
I'm afraid,
Troy, he's
James,
down.
when they start overperforming like this first system last week, that's not a good sign.
No,
Yeah.
agreed.
Yeah, Troy's down there in his tank top and flip flops.
And it's going to be, I mean, we get, like Rick said, we get close to 70 by the end of the week. Main thing around here for the time being, we get cold front sometime midday Wednesday, very weak one, and another one about Friday. But basically, all it does is reinforce the air mass in place across our area. So things look pretty stable and dry here. But I find it interesting, if you had a chance from the Climate Prediction Center today to look at their 8 to 14 day outlook, they're painting more of a shift in the pattern by the mid and latter part of next week. You see this in some of the models where more wet over West Texas, where they've had a lot more drought, and perhaps even a wetter pattern around here. But I'm sort of like Rick, and I've always quoted Rick for what he says. People say, well, when is the Oklahoma tornado season? And, you know, it's April and May. And I love what Rick has said in the past. The tornado season in Oklahoma runs from January 1 to December 31st. You know, and I'm not about, like Neil said, about to make any pronouncement to say winter's over with, because that happens. I'm just nervous about doing that. Yeah.
Well, forget all this talk. What happened on Groundhog's Day? I was getting a colonoscopy on Groundhog's Day. I missed all that. That's what I thought about the whole situation.
Oh, I'd love to.
There's your show title.
Oh gosh. Hold me, Lord, hold me.
Yeah. No, that you know, the blowouts the night before, you're just knocked out in the morning. It happens. I mean, it's like, but it was Groundhog's Day when I got that thing last week. So, and then what does that mean? 6 more weeks of winter.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by winter, and where? Are you talking about in Pennsylvania and Walla Walla, in you know, Rockford, Illinois? I mean, where? The whole thing, I think it's a scam. So I'll just leave it at that.
We've got an armadillo here in Austin out at the West Pole. We call it the West Pole. It's out west of Austin that comes out and sees its shadow too. So I want to point that out, that Phil's not the only weather forecaster. Yeah.
What's the
New
one
York
down
City
here?
has a rat.
Birmingham Bill. What? Who has a rat?
I said New York City probably has a rat.
What's the one down here, Bill? Is it Birmingham Bill?
Birmingham Bill.
Birmingham Zoo.
Birmingham Zoo. That's what I don't know what he portended when he came out of his burrow. Maybe he slept through it or something. I don't know.
But no, there was a news piece that he did sleep through it. He just slept through the whole thing. I mean, nothing happens. So anyway,
we had this animal that what happened last week is they go to bring him out of his burrow and the thing dies. Did y'all hear about that one?
What?
Oh yeah, there was some animal somewhere and they go to pull the thing out of its burrow and it just falls over.
What does that mean for the forecast? That doesn't sound good.
The end of the world is nigh. Yeah. I'm digging a hole. So let's go to picks of the week here. So everybody's going to go around and pick something that's weather related. And mine is kind of a sad one. We had a broadcast meteorologist in Tulsa, Clint Boone, who passed away suddenly yesterday, and he was on the air Saturday night. And Rick, did you know him at all by any chance?
I got to meet him a couple of times. He came down for our National Weather Festival a couple of times. He was a great guy, and I was shocked to see that yesterday. That's just so sad.
Yeah. Again, I don't know if I've had a chance to meet him, but he looks very familiar. But he again was on the air Saturday night, and he's a younger guy. I mean, as old as I am. Anybody under 70 is young, but I want to say he was about 50. And but again, it's a horrible story, and we'll just lift up his family and the survivors and the folks that work at Channel 6 in Tulsa, because that is a hard thing. We experienced that here at my place last June, where our news anchor, I was with him on a Friday night. Everything was great. We were yucking it up. He was excited about the weekend. And the next morning he was dead. I got a call at 8:00, and I know what they're going through, and it's not easy. So anyway, my pick of the week, it's a link to an article about the death of Clint Boone, a meteorologist in Tulsa. So Jen, let's see if you've got a happier pick of the week for us.
I hope so. But I teased earlier in the show that I have now 4 chipmunks that are helping me. We had a meeting last night. It was a research writing meeting about our February schedule. We're going to be really aggressive to try to get some stuff out the door. And a little tease, one of the new summaries we're writing is from this book, Early American Tornadoes, 1586 to 1870, from David Ludlam. And this is my pick of the week. So one of the tornadoes is from in here. And so it will be the earliest tornado that we've written about, from 1834. That's all I'm saying. But we started researching it a little bit last
Troy,
night.
weren't you on radio back then?
You might remember this.
Yeah, I was doing afternoons. You were doing mornings, buddy.
We were working together back then.
So that is my pick of the week.
All right. So Troy, I know you got to get out of here. What's on your mind? What you got?
You know, I hit that keyboard. There you go.
Baby, come on. I just like hearing the sound of that thing. Wow. All right. So let's go to let's see, Rick, what you got for us this week?
Well, I have to think that Daryl Hertzman's Iowa Environmental Mesonet pages have been picks of the week multiple times, but I had to pick one. Not too long ago, he was. I guess there's so many. If you dig into his site, there's just you could be there for hours or days. Just all the data that's there. But he kind of is always expanding his database, and he recently expanded one of the databases, the text product search. Now it goes all the way back into the 90s. So you can go. My pick of the week is the link to this text product finder. So you can search for, let's say, as a kid there was a tornado event that you remember. You can go find the tornado warnings or the severe weather statements from that. If you're a weather geek, a weather dweeb like we are, that's cool stuff. And Daryl actually helped me go back and find some of the earliest state forecast discussions and severe weather statements that I ever wrote that had my initials or forecaster number or name on it. So I don't know, it's just a time machine kind of thing that's very cool to go back and look at old products, see how they've changed over the years. So that's my pick.
And Daryl is just a great guy. And that is, it's remarkable, the plethora of information that you got on that site. Be able to go back and search like that. That's just tremendous. And again, these picks will be on the website, weatherbrains.com. All right, Neil, what you got for us this week?
So my pick of the week is an award, an NSF award, completely coincidental with Candace being the guest, but it's to Florida International University's Extreme Events Institute. And FIU just received $12.8 million grant from NSF to design a new wind surge and wave testing facility. And if you haven't seen or experienced their wall of wind that they have down there now, I gotta say, I had a chance to go visit it. It's crazy. They can generate up to 157 mile an hour winds with the current one. And if you haven't seen it, it looks like they've got like literally a wall of turboprop jet engines. And when I went down there to visit, they build like modeled reduced scale buildings to sort of see what they can withstand. And so I went in there and I said, can you guys turn this on? I want to stand in front of it and see what it could do. And I was like, this is going to be awesome. I'll just tie myself up with a rope and we'll crank it up. And they said, we can't, because there's a mama cat who's had some kittens in the bottoms of like one of the fans or something. We stopped all the experiments until the family of kittens is moved on. And so I thought, it's totally respect that decision, but I wanted to stand in front of that thing so bad. But apparently the new one is going to be able to exceed 200 miles an hour. So
wow.
Impressive.
Well, if you get back down there, be sure and roll some video so we can roll it on the show here.
Yeah,
because I
think we need a WeatherBrains field trip, James. That sounds like that would be right up our alley.
What's so sad? Probably all of us want to do that. Yeah, deep down inside, we all want to do that. I would love to do that. That's like slightly awesome. All right, Bruce, great to have you back. What's on your mind? What's your pick this week?
Oh, hey, I'll show off something that I finally found on the internet. In May 17th, 1896, we had a tornado outbreak in northeast Kansas, and the town of Reserve was kind of on the tail end of that. And this was kind of a cycling supercell that dropped quite a few tornadoes, very slow moving tornadoes across northeast Kansas. We had several cities that were directly hit. By the time it got into Brown County, and this is the Brown County newspaper from that day, and it hit the town of Reserve, Kansas, it was becoming more of this like HP, maybe there was a tornado, but there was certainly a lot of derecho type damage up there. And it really destroyed the entire town of Reserve. And that's the Brown County World newspaper from a couple of days afterwards, May of 1896. And Grisoulis at one time said that he thought May of 1896 was one of the most violent months in the United States tornado history, because we just had a whole bunch of them, including this outbreak in Kansas. And then that was followed about 4 days later by the big St. Louis tornado.
Well, there you go, Jen. There's another one for you.
I love having Bruce on, but every time he's on, I want his pick of the week. Literally want his pick of the week. I would like to have that.
Jen and I share that passion for these old
sure
tornadoes.
do.
It's very interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So Bruce, do you have a lot of memorabilia you've collected, like these newspapers and things?
Yeah, and I got some nice J.P. Finley books and stuff up here, and maps and things. It used to be a little easier to find the stuff back 20, 25 years ago when the internet was first starting, and the used books and things were first starting to show up on the internet. But now it's a little more difficult to find the stuff, I think. So I keep looking.
I've got about 4 boxes up here in the garage up over the shelf there. I'll have to bring those out. We'll have to have dueling.
Let's go through it.
Let's do that. And Troy can take the foghorn for me for a couple of weeks.
There you go.
And we'll see who can vote on the best memorabilia. James, you want me to go ahead?
Well, notice Aubrey's not here this week. I think she's still mad at me for forgetting her last week. It was a picks of the week, and I just totally forgot Aubrey. And I think she stewed, and that's the reason she's not on the show this week. But she's probably, and again, for those that don't know, a lot of us have jobs and we're working the night shift. We're working while we're doing the show here. And so sometimes Aubrey has to back out because of work. And we know Kim was out tonight, but she should be back next week. But Bill, you take it. Go.
Yeah, I would take the foghorn, except Troy already took it. And so I'll talk about some of the guests that are coming up, James.
I can blow it again now.
Yeah, never have enough foghorn.
You're getting too quick with that, James. I mean, come on.
Yeah, he's had plenty of practice with me. But the show next Monday night has been moved to Tuesday night for, of all reasons, a curling championship. So I'll let you figure that out on next week's show. But the Monday night show is moving to Tuesday. That frees you all up, those of you who have a life, to have a real Valentine's celebration Monday night. And we'll come back and do this thing on Tuesday night. But I'm really looking forward to the show with Mike Bettis and his wife, Allison Chinchar, talking about 2 meteorologists in the family. That'll be a lot of fun. I'm sure we all have some stories to share there. Will Hathaway will join us the following week, a friend of yours from down in the Austin territory, the Texas Hill Country there, Troy. And Michaela Smith got a lot of attention this last week or so with her ASL presentation and part of her meteorology. So Jen has got her lined up to be the guest panelist. Anything you want to add to that, Jen?
No, I'm excited. We're going to talk to her this week and kind of just outline her story. But that popped up on Twitter, and she has a passion to reach out to the deaf and hard of hearing community. And I'm excited to talk to her. This is something that makes my heart beat fast too, is working with the special needs community. So she's very passionate. I'm excited to talk to her.
And the show we've added to the calendar this week is on Monday, May the 16th. This is the 150-year anniversary of the Monthly Weather Review. And the Monthly Weather Review's chief editor, David Schultz, is going to join us along with weather historian Sean Potter on the 16th of May to talk about the history of the Monthly Weather Review and all of its impact. And so that's just some of the fun stuff coming up here in future weeks on WeatherBrains. James, I asked Roger Hill to slip into that February 14th show with his wife, and he said she would have killed him if he had canceled their Valentine's dinner. So we didn't want to break up any marriages, so we went ahead and just moved it today.
That's a good thing. Before we go, I guess we need to congratulate Ken Graham,
Yeah.
the National Weather Person of the Year.
Yep.
That's cool. Ken, of course, the director of the National Hurricane Center. He's been on the show. A lot of us have known Ken for a long time, and he was so deserving of that. He's just got a passion for the science, and at the same time has a passion for the people that he serves. And when you see that combination, typically people are very successful. And he certainly is that. And so congratulations to Ken, the National Weather Person of the Year. So if you're new to the show here, we typically record on Monday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. And some people watch us live and some gather together at live.bigbrainsmedia.com. But we know that most of you listen, and we thank you for that. If you want to get in touch with us, our email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. In the show notes, the picks of the week, all the things we talk about, it'll be over on the website, weatherbrains.com. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless.
James, we have the best audience. Chris Musso was worried that we might not be able to find Bruce's placard before he got to the. So at 7:17, shout out to him. He screen capped it off an old show and sent it over just in case we needed it.
Wow.
How about that?
How
That's
good is that?
dedication.
That's awesome.
Our listeners are like producers. They're the greatest.
Yep.